Okay, hi everyone. Today is February 2nd. Can't believe we're already in February. So today I wanted to take the opportunity within this English 203 lecture. It's not a long lecture, but I want to take the opportunity to sort of address, as you can see here, the idea of Slaughterhouse Five, Kurt Vonnegut's probably his most famous novel, uh, and how that is considered an anti-war novel. We touched upon some of this in a prior lecture, but I really wanted to sort of drill down on the concept and maybe go a little bit more in depth. And this can give you sort of an idea and a parlance for moving forward if you want to include this subject matter within an essay moving forward. Because your short essay number one, as I'll talk about at the end of this lecture, is due next class. Is due February 4th. The short essay number one due via Blackboard, and I'll email everybody. Just a quick note: I'll email everybody that morning of the 4th with instructions on how to post it to Blackboard. Uh, as was mentioned in a prior lecture, Slaughterhouse Five has been interpreted by many casual readers and professional critics alike as an anti-war novel. We could see examples of what could be considered anti-war films, as you can see here. We have Hotel Rwanda, uh, Gallipoli, which is about World War One, Born on the 4th of July, which is about Vietnam War, Full Metal Jacket, same thing, Vietnam War, All Quiet on the Western Front, World War One, and um, so just going back to Hotel Rwanda, it outlines it's a movie that outlines the true atrocities of mass genocide that had taken place in 1994 between two warring people, the Hutus and the Tutsis. Um, so this film is considered anti-war because it showed the ugliness of war without glorifying it. I think it's a really strong point to be made of what is how do we can sort of classify and interpret an anti-war novel or film in this case. And in its ability, Hotel Rwanda, and I implore you to watch it. I'm sure it's out there somewhere. This unadorned, non-extolling element of anti-war seems to be the central element of Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse Five 2, whereby the reader is exposed to the unadulterated rawness of war and even the toll it expels on those who sacrifice their lives due to war and those who are left to survive with post-war traumas of some sort, as we see with um, Billy Pilgrim. The idea of PTSD manifesting itself in his hallucinations of the Truffle is one way individuals have synthesized an argument around why the existence of Truffle and how reliable they are with regard to being real or fictitious. We assume that is this an extrapolation of his PTSD, the protagonist Billy Pilgrim. So let's take a closer look and a more in-depth look at how the novel of Slaughterhouse Five is really an exemplar of anti-war novels. Okay, so Dresden, you can see it here as a postcard prior to the war. Beautiful medieval city, almost completely intact in terms of its integrity and fidelity to the architecture of medieval times, Baroque architecture. But unfortunately, it was all destroyed. Um, there are various instances throughout the novel that demonstrate how Vonnegut was attempting to condemn the notion of war. Vonnegut was inspired via his experience during the war, as we know, and the protagonist of the novel, Billy Pilgrim, expresses Vonnegut's perspective regarding the horrors of war. But the main indications in the novel that denoted anti-war sentiments were Vonnegut's unique literature techniques, humanism, and authorial positioning, or what's called authorial intrusion. We covered this slightly in a prior class. Uh, which we see throughout the novel, whereby Vonnegut is addressing the reader directly, that authorial intrusion, where he just sort of breaks that fourth wall and says that was me, that's me in the novel. I'm talking about me as Kurt Vonnegut, right? Uh, at some point, he does that a few times. Well, first off, the opening chapter is addressing us, and he's being himself, right? He is the author of this novel, talking about reminiscing about the war with his friend. And then, of course, we get the last chapter too. We get iterations sprinkled throughout the novel as well, where he sort of says, like in the middle of a movie, cut, cut, cut. Here, hey, let me talk directly to you, the reader. He does this for a number of reasons. One, he wants to embed himself within the narrative in order to demonstrate the first-hand knowledge he has of these horrific events. Uh, in effect, telling us directly that this is all, or mostly, as he mentions in the opening chapter, autobiographical information. So you should probably trust me, he's saying, as we meander throughout the novel in its narrative. And two, he does this authorial intrusion, uh, because Vonnegut is speaking directly to us, the reader, especially where he's accompanied by Billy Pilgrim in the same scene. So when he's directly addressing us as the reader, and Billy Pilgrim's sharing that scene with him in the book, Vonnegut is telling us that Billy Pilgrim, or those like Billy, were real. He did witness hell on earth made available through war, and especially where he's and that Billy Pilgrim wasn't simply nuts or insane, and therefore just recounting an insane escapade, of Tralfamadorians, of witnessing all these this horrific scenes within war. So he's legitimizing that there were individuals, maybe that there wasn't necessarily a real Billy Pilgrim, but there certainly are people like Billy Pilgrim who suffered through war and was able to see these atrocities unfold in front of them. And he legitimizes that by being in the same scene and then waving to us as the reader saying, "That's me, I was there." So in this way, he's legitimizing Billy Pilgrim and the soldiers like Billy Pilgrim's experience. Okay, let's take a look at some specific techniques Vonnegut incorporates to further express this notion of anti-war. Okay, so you sort of see someone's rendition of a Tralfamadorian. As you know, they look like plungers with a hand and an eyeball in the center of the palm of the hand. And a quote from the book, we see 4 dimensions, pity earthlings with only 3. So the incorporation of science fiction, we talked about the book being appealing to 3 sort of genres or subgenres of writing, science fiction, autobiographic, and historical as well, and a war novel. So the incorporation of science fiction, that element of it, with the Tralfamadorians by Vonnegut operates as a further method to express his feelings against warfare, that anti-war sentiment. It was described in the novel that the Tralfamadorians are capable of observing 4 dimensions, but due to this specific ability, they hold a completely different mentality of comparisons to humans. The Tralfamadorians say how only the earth is there who talk of free will. Only the earthlings do that, right? It's on page 133. This represents the view of Vonnegut that humans' beliefs of free will are causing the war. Hence, the Tralfamadorians' belief of fatalism, the idea that we are fated towards something, that we can't change it, aims to justify the irrationality of war by criticizing humans' thoughtless decisions on initiating war. The Tralfamadorians also stated that there will always be a war on Earth since humans are designed that way. It's inevitable. This statement was intended by Vonnegut to dishonor war and cast it in a negative light. In addition, the existence of the Tralfamadorians in this novel is another way Vonnegut thinks about the war. The hallucinations Billy experiences after the war tells the reader how his life has changed. It also shows how he's trying to erase his horrific memory of the war by escaping his reality and embracing the Tralfamadorian world and their philosophy on life. Therefore, Vonnegut is contrasting the concepts of philosophy between humans and between the Tralfamadorians, the non-humans. Okay, so here we can see an image pre-Dresden bombing on the left, and then post-Dresden bombing. Terrific. I mean, it just really just raised the entire city, it seems like, with the bombing. And we get, attestation of that within the novel. So the fire and bombing of Dresden in Germany was an extremely influential event for Vonnegut, no doubt, right? It sparked the idea of this novel. As Vonnegut recalls the incident in Dresden, he relates the event in a way that allows the reader to engage in his personal perspective of the incident. He encounters the Dresden experience with sadness rather than aggression, pain, and resentfulness. Billy observes the sadistic and cruelty of the world when the city of Dresden gets bombed. He feels the awkward misery over the attack due to his situation of being ambushed by his allies, and he experiences and sees the suffering of his enemies. In this way, Vonnegut draws attention of the reader to the underlying theme of man's capacity of violence and cruelty. So our inability to escape war is definitely a strong theme that runs the breadth of this novel. The cyclical nature of man to really not have free will, right? As the Tralfamadorians point out to us, that our whole lives are spread out as these mountains of peaks and valleys, like the Rocky Mountains, that we could see in the past. They could see the 4th dimension, both in the past and in the future and in the present, all in the same breath. Billy also described the aftermath of the attack by saying, "Once a beautiful city looking like the surface of the moon." Therefore, by utilizing the voice of Billy, Vonnegut is trying to persuade the reader that any sort of massacre, even those of our enemies, should not be considered with satisfaction or joy, as we all are humans to be valued. So war, in a sense, and in many regards within this novel, is a cyclical but yet ugly expression of the human experience. Uh, and we spoke about this briefly, but I think deserves reiteration and underscoring. Another reason this novel promotes anti-war sentiments can be accessed through the parenthetical title, if you recall, Children's Crusade. This title represents the soldiers in the warfare as children, thus implying that they are naive and innocent. This is a very reason as to why Vonnegut portrayed the soldiers as children, so that it can be emphasized that the wars are fought by the children who are incapable of comprehending the cause of war or even predicting its horrific outcomes. Therefore, Vonnegut attempts to convey his message that these children soldiers are being exploited by sadistic leaders. Vonnegut has chosen the word children, as children have no duty in war, thus the war should not be occurring. This also leads us, the reader, to be sympathetic of the soldiers. They are depicted without any independent thought and do not have the motivation to take other people's lives. Vonnegut is also trying to cast a negative light upon the instigators of war with this title. Thus, the overall message of Slaughterhouse Five is that war is not heroic or glorious, and that government propaganda tries to blind people from the ugly truth of warfare. It can then be seen with these elements that Vonnegut is endorsing a negative perspective towards war. Okay, so the literary technique of irony is also employed to further uphold the anti-war theme or sentiment within this novel by making light of a horrific scenes and misery from war. This use of black humor, and Vonnegut is writing is the epitome of black humor. He's known as a black humorist. It makes Vonnegut's audience laugh inappropriately. It makes us laugh as the reader inappropriately at its instances of death and destruction, which then leaves a significant impact upon us. Because of this dark sense of humor he brings, that he pushes the narrative through this prism of dark comedy. I mean, we see it with So It Goes, and as we see here, 2 images on the screen, and Poo to Wheat that he starts the novel with and ends it with. So he does this to effectively convey his anti-war sentiment by manipulating the audience, the reader, to feel guilty and ashamed for sort of laughing along with him within a novel at moments, not the entire breadth of the novel, obviously, but there are definitely moments that he's being humorous in a dark sort of way. Another aim for this technique is to allow the reader to deeply reflect on the negative side of war. The main example of irony used in this novel by Vonnegut would be the ending of the novel, when the bird says "Poo to eat" to Billy after there was a lengthy passage detailing a pile of rotting bodies. This signifies that the war is a nonsensical and unnecessary thing, just like what the bird has said to Billy, the "Poo to eat," right? A further example of irony used in this novel is a highly unlikely instance where the trained infantry scouts are killed. However, Billy and Ronald are not trained and survive. So sort of ironic that the untrained survive and the very trained individuals end up dying and succumbing to war. Thus, this is a technique creates a guilty conscience for the reader because war is inappropriate subject to be laughed at. This exploitation of the reader's conscience towards the issue of war relates back to the anti-war sentiment that is evident throughout the novel. Okay, so furthermore, Vonnegut ends the novel exactly how he said he would in chapter 1 with the bird chirping. With nothing to say about the horrific bombing themselves, the survivors can only remain silent, but birds are never silent. To birds, the firebombing was just another event in their lives, so they should just go on tweeting like they knew it would happen anyways. Perhaps Vonnegut is connecting the birds to the Tralfamadorians. Both seem to go on with their lives as if it's all part of the plan and death is unavoidable. So it goes. Okay, as always, questions. Please email me if you have any questions or concerns. Just a little bit of housekeeping, looking ahead at the course outline. Your first short essay is due via Blackboard next Friday, February 4th, so 2 days from now. The expectations for the short essay, and you'll be able to submit it by midnight, right? You have till midnight on the 4th. But the expectations for this short essay are as follows. Nothing that we covered this before, but 3 to 5 pages, double-spaced, Times New Roman font. This is every English class you're ever going to be in. And an MLA formatting style, not APA, please. I don't want to see in-text citations with a year in it. It's not MLA, that's strictly APA. So you have one primary source, that's the expectation of all these of the short essays. So your one primary source, as you can see here listed, is either going to be Black Zodiac on Charles Wright's poetry collection, or Slaughterhouse Five by Kurt Vonnegut. And then two secondary sources. So there's going to be outside articles, journals, critiques, critics reviews, newspaper articles, magazine articles, or any type of testimony from an expert or authority on the subject matter you chose to focus on within your essay. Uh, I'll email you the morning of the 4th with instructions on the morning of the 4th, outlining how to post your essay to Blackboard. One last note about the MLA. So part of MLA is also, since you're going to have one primary source and two secondary sources, you're going to have a works cited page listing those three sources, right? So be aware of that. And if you quote directly or paraphrase within your essay, you're going to have that in-text citation of these three sources. So just bear that in mind. Please email me if you have any questions. Thanks, guys. Talk to you later. Bye.